The snow fell in thick, silent sheets outside the frosted window, each flake a whispered reminder that while some families gathered around warm fires with full tables, others sat in darkness pretending tomorrow wouldn't come. Sarah Mitchell pressed her forehead against the cold glass, watching her breath fog the pain as her two children slept, fitfully on the worn couch behind her. Christmas Eve, the words tasted bitter in her mouth. 6 months ago, she had a husband, a home that didn't leak when it rained, and the kind of future that felt solid beneath her feet. Now she had 3 boxes of donated food, a space heater that barely worked, and the crushing weight of wondering how she'd explain to a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old why Santa had forgotten them this year. She hadn't heard the knock at first. When it came again, louder this time, her heart seized with the particular fear of a woman alone who knows the landlord wants his rent and child services, has been asking questions. Sarah wiped her eyes quickly, straightened her shoulders, and opened the door just a crack, the security chain still in place. On the other side stood a man who looked like he'd been carved from granite and weathered by storms. Tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes that had seen things no person should see. He wore a simple jacket and jeans, snowflakes melting in his close-cropped hair. "Mrs. Mitchell?" His voice was low, respectful. "My name is Marcus Webb. I know this is strange, me showing up like this on Christmas Eve, but I need you to trust me for just a minute." He held up both hands, showing he meant no harm. "I was at the community center earlier today. Heard about your situation. I'm not here to judge, and I'm not here to take anything from you. I'm here because—" He paused, and something flickered across his face, a memory perhaps, or a ghost. "Because nobody should be alone tonight, especially not kids." Sarah should have closed the door. Every instinct screamed at her to protect her children, to not trust strangers, to handle this impossible situation on her own the way she'd been handling everything since David died in that car accident. But there was something in Marcus's eyes, something honest and raw and deeply human, that made her fingers pause on the doorframe. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want you and your kids to come with me," Marcus said simply. "Just for tonight. I have a place. It's warm. There's food, and before you say no, I need you to know that I understand what it's like to have nothing. I understand what it's like to feel like you failed everyone who matters. And I understand that accepting help feels like admitting defeat." He took a slow breath. "But it's not defeat, Mrs. Mitchell. It's just being human." 20 minutes later, Sarah found herself buckling Emma and Jake into the back seat of Marcus's truck, their sleepy faces confused but trusting in the way only children can be. She sat in the front, her hands twisted in her lap, watching the Christmas lights blur past through the window. Marcus drove in comfortable silence, not pushing her to talk, not filling the air with empty platitudes. When they finally pulled up to a modest 2-story house on the edge of town, warmth glowed from every window like a promise. Inside, the smell of pine and cinnamon wrapped around them like an embrace. A real Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated simply but beautifully. The house was clean, organized, but lived in, a home, not a showplace. Marcus helped the kids take off their thin jackets, and Sarah noticed the way his large hands were surprisingly gentle, the way he knelt down to their level when he spoke to them. "I bet you guys are hungry," Marcus said to Emma and Jake. "How about some hot chocolate and cookies while your mom and I talk for a minute?" The children's eyes went wide with something Sarah hadn't seen in months. Pure, uncomplicated joy. She nodded her permission, and Marcus led them to the kitchen, returning a moment later with 2 mugs of coffee. They sat across from each other at the dining table, and Sarah finally asked the question that had been burning in her chest. "Why are you doing this? You don't know us. This isn't... People don't just do this." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his hands wrapped around his coffee mug. 8 years ago, he began, his voice rough with memory. "I came back from my 3rd deployment. Navy SEAL, Special Operations. I'd seen things, done things, lost friends in ways that stay with you forever. I came home to nothing. My marriage had fallen apart while I was overseas. I had no job lined up, and I had PTSD so bad I couldn't sleep without seeing the faces of people. I couldn't save." He looked up at her, and Sarah saw the scars in his eyes. Christmas Eve that year, I was sitting in my car in a Walmart parking lot, trying to work up the courage to end it. I had a gun. I had a plan. And then this old man knocked on my window. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. His name was Arthur. He didn't know me, didn't know what I was planning, but he asked me to come have dinner with him and his wife. Said nobody should be alone on Christmas. I thought he was crazy, but something made me say yes. That dinner saved my life. Mrs. Mitchell, not just that night, but every night after. Arthur and his wife, Margaret, they helped me get into therapy, helped me find work, helped me remember what it meant to be human again. Marcus's voice cracked slightly. Arthur died 2 years ago. Before he passed, he made me promise something. He said, "Marcus, you find someone who needs help, and you help them." That's how the light keeps going. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face before she realized she was crying. "I don't know how to accept this," she whispered. "I don't know how to be someone who needs saving." "You're not being saved," Marcus said gently. "You're being seen. There's a difference." He stood up and walked to a closet, returning with several wrapped presents. "These are for your kids. Nothing fancy. Some clothes, some toys, some books. And this," he handed her an envelope. "This is the contact information for a friend of mine who runs a nonprofit. She helps people get back on their feet. Job training, housing assistance, childcare support. She's expecting your call after the holidays." Sarah stared at the envelope, then at Marcus, then at her children laughing in the kitchen over hot chocolate and cookies. For 6 months, she had been drowning in grief and shame and the desperate struggle to survive. For 6 months, she had believed that she was alone in a world that didn't care whether she sank or swam. And now, on the darkest night of the year, a stranger had offered her light. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice breaking. "You don't have to thank me," Marcus replied. "Just promise me something. Someday, when you're back on your feet and life feels solid again, you'll find someone who needs help, and you'll help them. That's how Arthur's light keeps going. That's how we save each other." They stayed until nearly midnight, the children falling asleep under blankets on Marcus's couch while Sarah and Marcus talked about loss and hope, about fear and courage, about the strange and beautiful ways humans find each other in the darkness. When Marcus finally drove them back to their apartment, he carried the sleeping children inside and made sure the space heater was working properly. Before he left, he pressed a piece of paper into Sarah's hand with his phone number. "If you need anything," he said simply. "Anything at all." Sarah watched him drive away, the red taillights disappearing into the snow. And for the first time in 6 months, she felt something stirring in her chest that felt dangerously like hope. She looked at her sleeping children, at the presents stacked carefully by the door, at the envelope that might contain a future she'd stopped, letting herself imagine. Christmas morning arrived with pale winter light, filtering through the frosted windows. Emma and Jake woke to presents and joy, and the kind of magic they thought had been stolen from them. Sarah made breakfast with the groceries Marcus had quietly left in her refrigerator, and as she watched her children laugh and play, she understood what Marcus had tried to tell her. This wasn't charity. This wasn't pity. This was humanity at its most essential. One broken person reaching out to another, building bridges across the darkness, keeping the light going. She picked up her phone and looked at Marcus's number, then at the envelope from his friend's nonprofit. Tomorrow she would make those calls. Tomorrow she would start building a new future. But today, on Christmas morning, she simply sat with her children and felt the warmth of knowing that in a world that could be cruel and cold and impossibly hard, there were still people like Arthur, like Marcus, like the person she hoped to become, people who understood that. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say to someone drowning in darkness is simply this: "Come with me. You're not alone. Not anymore." And somewhere in the city, Marcus Webb sat in his quiet house, looking at the photo of Arthur and Margaret on his mantel, and he whispered a promise to the man who had saved his life. "The light keeps going, Arthur. The light keeps going.